Hi everyone, this is Adam Martin, and in this video I'm going to show you how to make infographics with a great program called DataWrapper. DataWrapper is a really easy to use online application that allows you to upload data in order to create charts, graphs, and different kinds of maps. And I'll demonstrate a number of different charts and graphs and also a couple different kinds of maps. Let's start out by looking at a few slides from a presentation that actually came right from DataWrapper. So this slide sort of animates through how you upload data to DataWrapper, choose a chart or graph to visualize your data, customize that chart or graph, and then ultimately publish and embed it on the web. And we'll walk through each of those steps quite a few times in this video. So this is the screen in DataWrapper that allows you to choose the type of chart or graph that you want. You can see there's lots of different choices. So you're able to upload your data and then visualize it in a number of different ways to choose the chart or the graph that sort of fits your data best. So all kinds of different bar and column charts, some nice dot plots and scatter plots, area chart, a couple different types of pie charts, and even an election donut chart. So here's a nice example of a DataWrapper chart that shows a number of different lines plotted against, as a time series plotted against years. Here's another one, and you can see that DataWrapper graphics are fully interactive. This one allows you to select a specific line and highlight that line, and also get data from every single point along the time series. Lots of great bar chart and column chart options in DataWrapper. Again, here we're seeing everything is fully interactive, allowing you to really drill down to specific parts of the chart to get sort of an overview of the data and also zoom in on specific parts that you might be interested in. Here's a nice dot plot. Here's an example of some small multiples in donut charts. Here's another nice scatter plot. And DataWrapper also has some really powerful mapping functionality. You can make Chloroplast maps, what they call symbol maps, and also simple but nice locator maps as well. Here's an example of a Chloroplast map for the United States. One of the great things about mapping with DataWrapper is they have a lot of shape files or sort of default templates for maps already built into the system. So for example, they have the world, they have all the different continents, they have the United States, but you can drill down much smaller than that. For example, we can look at a specific map of Maryland, and even in Maryland we can start drilling down and get a default map based on county, based on zip code, even based on different legislative districts. So they say they have over 1,000 administrative boundaries. And even if DataWrapper doesn't have a map that you want, you can upload the GeoJSON for that administrative boundary region and make a map for it in DataWrapper. So here's an example of a symbol map, which I'll show you guys how to make a little bit later in this tutorial. And also really nice locator maps, which you can even add some 3D functionality into. And finally, you can also make really nice interactive tables in DataWrapper. Here's some example of tables that integrate different graphics and symbols, and in addition to it being a table, it also includes line charts and column charts as part of that table, which is really nice. There's a few more, even more complex examples of that. DataWrapper also has some really nice export options, and this is one of the reasons it's been used in some real newsrooms like the LA Times to actually replace print graphic processes on their news desk. So you can export from DataWrapper as a PNG or even an SVG, a scalable vector graphic, which would allow you to then bring it into Illustrator, where you could customize it further. You can also export as a PDF. For our purposes, we'll mostly be making infographics for online. And of course, DataWrapper will give you an embed code. And I suggest using the responsive iframe embed code, which will give you a nice responsive graphic that will fit whatever size page you're working with. DataWrapper has some great resources out there to help people that are learning. They have the DataWrapper Academy at academy.datawrapper.de, which has some tutorials about making different types of charts using the program. There's also direct help in the app. You can see there's this Need Help button that's highlighted there on the slide that you can always click to get information about the specific graphic that you might be working on. There's also a nice DataWrapper blog called Chartable, where they have sort of tutorials and highlight different kinds of graphics and walk you through different processes, generally for how to create more complex graphics. Lots of how-tos on the DataWrapper blog. And finally, there's the DataWrapper River, which is just a sort of constantly updating river of graphics that people are making in DataWrapper and then sharing for public use. Okay, so let's go ahead and jump right into how to make some graphics for DataWrapper. I'll be referring to a few documents as we go through this tutorial. I have this document here that just where I've sort of saved some headline and chatter information that I'm going to use for some of the different graphics. And I also have this Google Sheets spreadsheet where I've got lots of data that I'm going to grab to make different graphics here during our tutorial. So the first thing we're going to make is we're going to make a bar chart, or really a column chart, that looks at COVID-19 cases by population in the United States. So what we're going to do is we're going to highlight the top 10 states that have the most COVID cases, confirmed COVID-19 cases in the United States. So you can see here I have some data that I pulled. This is from the New York Times COVID tracker, which itself compiles data from different state and local health departments. And I have population data that's been pulled from the US Census. And that'll give us, sort of a more accurate view of which states have the most cases based on population. So instead of, looking at raw data of number of cases, in which case a state like California is likely to have the most cases simply because they're really big and have a lot of people, what I've done is sort of include the population data so we can look at cases per person. So here we have the state, the date, the number of cases, the number of deaths, population, and this is cases per 1,000 people and deaths per 1,000 people. And I've truncated that a little bit, and this is actually not per person, it's per 1,000 people, so I'll change that just so it can be accurate, per 1,000 people. Okay, and I've truncated that a little bit because this is actually the data we need to put into DataWrapper. We're going to make a bar chart or column chart that has two bars, one that shows cases and one that shows deaths for each of these top 10 states. And again, these are the top 10 states based on cases. So when we look at this data, we see that Louisiana actually has the most cases per 1,000 people. Florida has the second most cases per 1,000 people. Then Arizona, Mississippi, down to Tennessee. So if we come over to DataWrapper, I'm going to go ahead and go to my dashboard, which is just going to show me all the graphics that I've made sort of so far up to this point. And what I want to do is hit New Chart. And the first step whenever you're making a DataWrapper graphic is to upload the data. And you can do that in a number of ways. You can upload a CSV or an Excel sheet. You can import a Google spreadsheet, or you can link to an external data sheet. What I generally like to do, and what we'll do throughout this tutorial, is I'll just copy and paste the data table in. So I'll just go ahead and grab the data that I want here. I'll copy it, right? Go to Edit, Copy. And then I'll come over here and I'll go ahead and paste that in. And I'll hit Proceed. And what DataWrapper is going to do now is show us our data in a table just so we can double check and make sure everything's correct. And this is correct. This is exactly what I wanted it to look like. So now we're good to go ahead and visualize. You can see it has a couple, we could actually keep working our data here. We could swap rows and columns, transpose the data if we wanted to, which sometimes might be necessary depending on how we're trying to visualize this data. Or we could also add columns and sort of build out our data a little bit further at this point. Okay, so now I'm going to go to proceed. And it's going to go ahead and try to visualize our data for us. And it generally defaults to a line chart, and even if that's not what you want, and in this case it's not, but what's nice about this view is we can actually click around on different chart types and try to see, what do we like? So here is it as a stacked column chart, not really what we're looking for, a grouped column chart, just a regular column chart. What I really want to get to are these bars up here. I'm going to take a look at, right, if we look at stacked bars, this is kind of interesting. So this is going to show us, in the dark blue bar, it's going to show us the number of cases, and in the lighter blue bar, it's going to show us the number of deaths. This isn't quite perfect. I think this is a fine graphic. This kind of implies having the bars together like this, that these are two parts of a whole, and they're really not. So what we'll do in this case is we'll do what's called split bars, which is basically going to create two bar charts or column charts sort of next to each other, which I think is kind of more appropriate for this data. And whenever you're creating an infographic, that's really what you want to think about, right? What's the best way to visualize my data so that it makes sense to people and so that it accurately represents the data that I'm trying to visualize? And generally, you also want to think about simplicity and ease of understanding of your viewer. When I was making infographics at the Baltimore Sun, we would often iterate many different versions of an infographic, and when we laid them out in front of the team and tried to decide which one to go with, one of the major things we would think about would be sort of readability or comprehension, right? Which one of these is the easiest for a viewer to understand what we're trying to say? Because people aren't going to give your infographics a lot of time usually, right? They're going to want to be able to glean the information fairly quickly. So I think this does that, right? It shows one bar that shows cases per 1,000 people and another bar that shows deaths per 1,000 people for each of our top 10 states. So I think this is the chart type we're going to go with. And now DataWrapper will give us lots of different ways that we can refine our graphic and sort of customize it in different ways. So for instance, we could put we could align left or align right our labels there, which we'll go ahead and align them to the right, give it a nice sort of solid alignment down the right side there. We can decide to show or to not show values. I definitely want to show the values here. Again, we can decide to show those on the right or on the left. I think we'll go ahead and put those on the right. We can change the number format, right? Maybe we don't want to show any decimals, or maybe we do. And I think in this case, it's kind of useful to have some of the decimals in there. For some charts, we might want to change the values on the horizontal axis. That doesn't make a lot of sense here with our charts, so we won't do that. We can also customize our colors, which is nice, right? We can choose one of the default color schemes from DataWrapper, and it'll just go ahead and implement it for us, which is good. We can also just choose any color from the color picker down here, or we can also choose some customizable colors for our different bars. In this case, well, I think I'm going to choose a color. We'll just go ahead and grab a color from Pantone's Color of the Year, which is this classic blue. We've got the hex value for it right here. So I'm just going to go ahead and grab that hex value. And it's not actually that different from the color that DataWrapper's already giving us, but it's good to customize a little bit. And so that'll be our main text color, and DataWrapper will sort of choose a second color based on value. We could also customize the two ourselves if we wanted to select either of these, and we could change very specifically what color we wanted to be each bar, and we can also change the text that's up at the top. Okay, like maybe we wanted to say cases per 1,000 people. There we go. There we go. Okay. Um, so we didn't really change it here, but the point is that we could if we wanted to. Okay, so do we want to have a legend? Do we want to have a color key? And of course we do, right? Though in this case it's not strictly necessary since we have labels right above our columns. We can also have some separating lines in between our different bars if we wanted to. We could also give the bars some background colors if we wanted to sort of extend that bar out to the end. We could make the bars thicker. There's even this mirror bars option, which I don't think I will select for this one. But maybe we'll go ahead and do the thicker bars just to give that a little bit more weight. So now we're sort of making some decisions about customizing our bars. We can even increase the space between the columns if we wanted to give a little bit more room there, just a little bit more white space in between those two columns. We could also change how the bars are sorted or reverse the order or group the bars in different ways, but this is pretty much what I'm looking for here. So I think we'll just proceed. So now we have the opportunity to add a title and chatter and source and even some notes to our data if we want to. And that's what I went ahead and pre-wrote all of that over here in my notes. So I'm going to copy this headline and go ahead and give it a headline. U.S. states with the most COVID-19 cases by population. And I've got a little bit of chatter that I wrote here. And so the idea with the headline in the chatter is to explain to people what they're seeing, right? Describe our chart and perhaps pull some interesting data out of it to help sort of formulate the message, right? So in this case, for the chatter or the description, we're saying Louisiana and Florida lead the United States in confirmed cases per 1,000 residents of the novel coronavirus as of September 1st, 2020. Louisiana also leads the country in deaths per 1,000 residents from COVID-19. Right, so with the headline, we're really telling people exactly what they're looking at, and with the description, we're sort of interpreting the graphic just a little bit. And I'm going to go ahead and add a note since this is an ongoing pandemic in the United States, right? It's important to note, as I've done in the chatter, when this data is current as of. And in this case, the data is current as of September 1, 2020, which is when I pulled this specific data. And of course, you always also want to include a source. In this case, the source was the data was collected by the New York Times based on reports from state and local health agencies and hospitals, right? So I got the data from the New York Times, but their data actually had a source, so I want to include both so that it's obvious where exactly all this data came from. And DataWrapper also allows you to include a link directly to your data, which I always like to do where possible, so people could check out that data themselves. And you can also add a byline for yourself. Okay, there we go. So that's a really nice graphic. We could highlight a specific, value or state if we wanted. In this case, I don't think we need to. This sort of tells us everything we need by ourselves. We could also, there's a couple different layouts. I find them, I usually just stick with DataWrapper with data as sort of the default one for my graphics. You could also choose one of these others just to sort of play around with it to see how it changes it. Sometimes it changes it a lot, sometimes not that much. In this case, it looks like it just changed the fonts that are being used, but I think we'll just stick with the standard one there. Could also enable social sharing, which I like to do. It just adds these share buttons there along the side. Okay, and now finally, I'm going to publish. Click Publish, and it'll take us to the Publish screen. And the first thing we need to do is click this button that says Publish Chart. Okay, now we've published our chart, and we can share it in a number of ways. So we can share this URL that DataWrapper gives us. It just sort of publishes the graphic for us at a URL, and we could send that to people or share it in any way that we wanted. Excuse me. It also gives us this embed code, as I was talking about before. So it'll give us a responsive iframe or just a regular iframe. I always go with the responsive iframe, and you can just copy it. And you can paste that into any HTML document or paste it into any CMS like WordPress. These responsive iframe embed codes work beautifully in WordPress posts or pages. So that's often how I'll end up publishing a graphic. You can allow reuse of your chart, which will it will add it to that river. And finally, we can also export it in a number of static files as either a PNG, a PDF, or a scalable vector graphic. And now we've completed our graphic, and we can use it sort of online, or in print, or however we want. And that'll also automatically be saved in your own dashboard. Okay, so that's a nice line chart. I'm sorry, bar chart. Next, I want to go ahead and show you guys how to make a simple line chart. So I'm going to go back to my dashboard. You can see here is the bar chart we just made. Here's a similar one that I made recently just when I was practicing for this tutorial. So I'm going to go ahead to New Chart. And the next thing we want to look at is I want to make a line chart that looks at how COVID-19 cases and deaths have steadily risen in the United States. And to do that, I've got some data that basically looks at the number of cases and the number of deaths in the United States at the end of each month of March through August. Right? And we can see that obviously the cases and the deaths jump pretty significantly in some cases each month. And so again, I'm just going to copy this data right out of the spreadsheet, and I will just paste it right in here. And if I go to, it might be nice if these had, let's go ahead and do upper cases here. That might make things a little bit cleaner just for the visualizing. Okay, it's going to show us our data in a table, and that all looks great. And I'll click Proceed. And so this is going to show us a line chart, and yeah, in this case, this is kind of what I'm looking for, is a line chart, right? And of course, the fact that the cases have such a higher number than the deaths, it's going to look like the cases have shot up much more than the deaths have, and that's just sort of a symptom of the data, but that's okay, right? It shows that we can click on the lines and see that the deaths are going up every month, as are the cases. We could do this graphic in a number of ways. As you'll see in a more advanced graphic that we do in a few moments, we could actually put in the number of cases and the number of deaths for every single day, and it would give us even more data and even a more accurate view, but we're just trying to create kind of a simple line chart at this point. Now we could click around and let DataWrapper try to visualize this for us in a number of different ways. We could do range plots or arrow plots or dot plots, none of which I find to be really very intuitive for users. We could do bullet bars, which that kind of shows what we're looking at here. The labels aren't displaying correctly, but I think a line chart is what I want to show here. So I'm just going to leave it there, and I'll go over to refine, and I'm going to need to make some changes to really get this graphic where I want. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make the graphic like much deeper, right? And that'll just help people be able to see it a little bit easier and dive down a little bit better. So select the column. Date is what we want down here, but you can notice that it's not really showing the date correctly, and that's because of this tick format. We've got date, sort of the year chosen, and let's play around with a few of these and see what we might like better. So here's one that'll show us the month, and it just sort of starts out by showing the year, and that's fine. Maybe that's what we want. Maybe we just want to show the month, and we can say in the chatter or the headline that this is 2020. That might be a little bit better. So let's go ahead and go with that. I think these ranges are fine. The ticks are fine. Do we want to show the grid lines? Let's show them, right? And so that's what that would look like, and just sort of give you a little bit more context into where specifically these lines are popping up. We can leave that for the moment. How do we want the grid lines to appear sort of next to each other or on their own? We'll show them in a linear way. I think all of this is fine. Yeah, I don't think we need to change anything on our vertical axes here. We could play around a little bit with some of these, like maybe we don't want to show those lines, or maybe we want to show the grid labels sort of inside or outside or auto, which isn't going to change much. Do we want our grid labels to be on the left or on the right? Right, lots of customizable options here. Okay, so again, we can change our base color, or we can individually customize the colors. I'll go ahead and change the base color again to this, same one that we used before, just to customize it a little bit. So it's going to start with this deeper blue, and then it's going to change the depth line in the same way. So I like to use this curved line sometimes, which just, sort of evens out the line a little bit. Not always, it really depends on sort of what you're visualizing, but we'll use that now just for something a little bit different. We can also fill the area between the lines if we wanted, and that sort of adds a connection between the two lines. Don't think we'll necessarily do that right now. Okay, where do we want our line labels to be? Kind of like them there at the right. Add a little bit more margin if we want, though I don't think we really need to in this case. Do we want to show the tooltips? I would say that we definitely do. We can change the format for the tooltips if we want, or we can keep it with our decimals, which I like a little bit more because it's adding the comma in that case. Yeah, let's go ahead and stick with that, or we could choose that one. Yeah, let's do that. That rounds it and keeps the comma in. Okay, I think that's the easiest to sort of understand. We could add some line symbols, right, which are gonna, where we have data points, it's gonna add a circle. We could also add like squares or diamonds or other sort of symbols. I always like to just do a square. Here it's just adding them to the first and the last. I kind of sometimes like to do it on every data point, and now people know where they can hover to get individual data points. Okay, so I think this is looking pretty good, right? We can increase the size of those dots if we wanted. I don't really want to do that. Or the opacity of the dots to make them see-through. But yeah, I think that this is in pretty good shape at this point. So we'll click Proceed. And this will now allow me to add some annotations. So I'm going to add a headline that says, right, COVID-19 cases and deaths have steadily risen in the United States. So in this case, I'm actually going to interpret the graphic a little bit in my headline and use the chatter to really, oops, typo there. And there. Okay, and I use the chatter to really tell people exactly what they're looking at here. Okay, so the description says, the United States has seen a stark increase of COVID-19 cases, with less than 200,000 confirmed cases at the end of April, rising to over 5 million by mid-August. COVID-19 deaths have also increased from 4,304 at the end of March to 169,394 by mid-August, right? So we're just sort of helping people understand exactly what they're looking at here. And so again, I've got the source of the data, right, and the source link. And I can add my byline. Okay, and that's great. And maybe we want to add in 2020 here, and that will just give people an idea, just be really clear about the fact that we're talking about data in 2020. Okay, so I think this is pretty good to go. So we're going to go ahead and go to Publish and Embed, and I'll just publish this one, and it's good to go, right? We'll have our link that we can share it, we'll have our embed, and we can also export as a static image. Okay, so I've created an exercise that you may want to do, and you can go ahead and go to the URL that you see on the screen to access this, where I've given you all the data that you'll need to create an infographic yourself. So the first thing you'll need to do is sign up for a free account at DataWrapper. I've included the data that you'll need. Looking at, this is the same bar chart that we created in the first exercise with U.S. states with the most COVID-19 cases by population. And I've given you all the information that you would need. So if you'd like to, go ahead and pause the video and take a moment to practice making your first column chart. Next, I'd like to show you how to make a more complex chart using DataWrapper. So what we're going to do is use some data that I have here from, this is actually from a different COVID tracker. This is from the Johns Hopkins University, has a really robust COVID-19 cases tracker that they track cases from all over the world. So this data has countries from all over the world, and it tracks number of new cases starting at the 1st of January and going all the way down to the end of August. And so what we're going to do is we're going to make a nice area chart that actually tracks new cases per day in all of these countries. Okay, so I'm going to start a new chart. Go ahead and paste in my data and click Proceed. Looks like everything was brought in correctly. So now we'll go ahead and visualize our data. And it's going to start us out with a line chart, which sort of does the trick, but isn't quite what I'm looking for. I'm going to go ahead and click on Area Chart here, and we'll see this is a much nicer view. Okay, so this is great, but I can really customize this a lot and make it much, sort of easier to understand and also much more attractive by doing a lot of customization. Okay, so first I want to customize the date along the bottom. I want to go ahead and have that just show months. That's good. And for my vertical axis, I want to go ahead and move that to the right instead of the left. I want to come back and customize colors here towards the end because there's something interesting we're going to do. I'm going to go ahead and bring up the opacity to 1 so we can really see these colors much better. I'm going to change the interpolation to curved, which just changes the way that the lines are structured just a tiny little bit. I'm not going to have any labeling up at the top. You guys will see why towards the end of this one. Let's see, I do want to show tooltips, and I think that number format is okay. Maybe we'll change it to that one so we don't have our decimals. Okay, that looks pretty good. I'm pretty happy with that. Okay, so let's go ahead and add in some annotation. So let's say, for instance, that we didn't want to have our headline up there at the top, that I actually wanted to use this big empty white space over here and put my headline over here. Well, there's certainly a way that we can do that. So I'm going to go ahead and copy my headline as just new confirmed COVID-19 cases per day. And I'm going to do that with something called text annotation. So I'm going to insert my text annotation here, which is just the headline. And I'm going to put some carriage returns in so it displays a little nicer. And now it's just telling me to click where you want that to go. And I'll just click, oops, I can click this button and click right here. And it'll go ahead and place my, my headline right there. And if I want to reposition it, I could just do it again, right? Just click that arrow and choose a new spot. And if we click this down button, it'll actually let us play with the way that the text is displayed a little bit. Like I probably want to make that bigger. Oops, not smaller, bigger. And bold. Whoa, oh my gosh. Okay. Let's do 24. There we go. Okay. That's what I'm looking for. And I could even move it around with this offset. Like maybe I just want it to be like 10 more pixels over or up or down. And I can sort of move things around a little bit that way. Okay, so that looks pretty good. I do want to add, I've got kind of like a big note, right, about this data. So let's go ahead and add that in, right? The 7-day rolling average of number of people confirmed have COVID-19 per day, not including today. This chart gets updated once per day with data by Johns Hopkins. Johns Hopkins University doesn't provide reliable data for March 12th and March 13th. So this was a note that I copied right from the sort of DataWrapper example graphic. So, we might want to trim this down a little bit for use in our graphic because our chart's not going to get updated once per day. So yeah, we can just trim that down just like that. Okay. There we go. Okay, so we'll go ahead and add in our source, which is the Johns Hopkins CSSE. and we can provide a link right to their data, which we should absolutely do when we can. They have a nice GitHub repo where they collect all this data. And for byline, I'm going to give the byline of DataWrapper, because really I didn't create this chart. I'm sort of borrowing this from the DataWrapper blog that they put out. Okay, so there are actually a couple more things we can do to really take this graphic to the next level. What we could do, this is nice because it's got different colors for every country, and we can scroll over it and see the country and have it sort of broken up for us. But what we could also do is we could customize our colors and change them for each country to actually group by continent. And then we could also use more of those text annotations to sort of show continents together. And I think that'd be really nice. And instead of, that would take probably 15 or 20 minutes to do. So instead of demonstrating that for the class, I'm just going to pop open an example where it's already been done here, and we'll just kind of take a quick look at how it was done. So here's the sort of final graphic once we were to do that. And you see that we're sort of grouping different countries together by color, and then we're also putting these text annotations over top of the different chunks where the countries exist. Let me show you how that was done. Right, if we look under Customize Colors, you can see really it was a matter of choosing a nice color palette for by continent. Right, so we have these reds that are used for Asia, and the blues that were used for Europe, and the yellows that were used for North America, greens that were used for South America, purple for Africa, and this dark blue for Australia, right? Which sort of visually groups all of these places together, right? So we can see all of the North American countries here in these different shades of yellow, and all the South American countries in these different shades of green. So here's where we just made a really nice design decision that helps sort of increase understanding of this data in a nice visual way. And finally, what we did was we used these text annotations, and you can see it just added annotation for Europe and plopped it on the blues where all the Europes are, and a text annotation for USA and put that where the United States is, and one for South America and put that over the greens. And in the end, we get a much more readable graphic. So this is a much more complex graphic than the other ones that we visualized. Has a lot more data, a lot more information going on, contained in it, and a lot more sort of visualization, where we've used some of our design tools, like color theory, for instance, to help people gain a better understanding of the data. Next, I'd like to show you how to make a few different types of maps using DataWrapper. This is the new map page of DataWrapper, and you can see that the program has the options to make a Chloroplast map, a symbol map, or a locator map. We're going to start out making a Chloroplast map, looking at different counties in Maryland. I've got some data here that shows Maryland counties. I pulled the data at the end of August. Here we've got cases, we have deaths, and we have the population of each county. And then we have cases per 1,000 residents and deaths per 1,000 residents. And let's go ahead and sort this data by county name. There we go. And so we can see, actually, let's go ahead and sort it by cases. And we can see that PG County has the most cases, followed by Baltimore City, then Montgomery County. If we sort by deaths, we can see that Kent County has the most deaths, followed by PG County, then Montgomery. And so we're actually going to do our visualization based on cases, but we'll include data for both cases and deaths. I've got a slightly different data sheet we're going to work from here, where I've just copied the columns that we'll need for our visualization. It'll be easy to work with this truncated data because we won't be including all these other columns that we're not actually going to visualize. So I'm just going to go ahead and copy and paste this data that I need. So I'll copy that, and I'll go back to DataWrapper and click the Chloroplast Map option. And first it's going to want me to choose a base map, like in what they call an administrative region. And like I said earlier in the training, there are just lots of them here. but there's a nice search and filter here. So we'll just click Maryland. And we can see we can create a Maryland map based on zip code, census tract, counties, district courts, and different legislative districts. We'll go ahead and do counties. And that's what we want to use. Okay, great. So these are the counties in Maryland. And I'm just going to go ahead and paste my data in. It's important to make sure that you're pasting it in the same order that they have it here, which is just alphabetical order, which is, we can just go ahead back to our data and double check. Yep. Okay, so I'm just going to go ahead and paste in my data here. And you can see it. We can't really change the names of the rows here. It's just calling the cases per 1,000 value, and it's giving the deaths per 1,000 C is the name of that column. And that'll be important for us to remember a little bit later. And the name of the county column is just ID. Okay, you can see it actually went ahead and created like a Chloroplast map for us, just assigned some color values based on these different numbers. So let's go ahead and click proceed, and we can customize it a little bit. So first we want to make sure it's basing the color scheme, the color ramp, off of the right column, which it is, value, which is our cases per 1,000 column. And we can change the colors, right? We can choose a different color ramp for it to use. Or we can add or remove stops, which are where the colors change in the gradient. Or we can completely change the colors in sort of a custom way if we want. We'll go ahead and just use this default color scheme, which is really quite nice. And it did a nice job just dividing this into buckets of 5. And there's not a lot we really need to customize here. It looks pretty good. So we can change some different values. Again, I think that the default here is really quite nice. Add a map label. We can add it by ID, which will just add the different county names, but we don't really need to do that right now. We can add in a title, or we can automatically generate a legend, which again isn't really doing much for us here. What I want to do though is I would like to generate some tooltips, right? Which means that a little box will pop up when we hover over individual counties. So this can be a little tough to understand at first. So the way that we can sort of dynamically bring in information from our table is by referring to it. See, here are the different values that are in our table. We have ID, which is the county name, value, which is cases, and C, which is deaths. And we can refer to those by putting these 2 brackets around them, which will dynamically bring in that value for each county. So let's say we want, for the title, we just want it to show the county name. Well, in that case, we can just, inside of our brackets, say ID. And now when we hover over each county, it's automatically showing us the county name, which is cool, but we want to go a little bit further. So for each county, let's include the the value, which you'll remember was cases per 1,000, and also C, which was the deaths per 1,000. And now it's giving us those 2 numbers, which doesn't make a lot of sense at this point, but now we can go back in and we can add a little bit of context. So next to value, we can say cases per 1,000 people. Then we can put in a BR tag, which is just a break tag. It's an HTML tag, which will add a line break or a carriage return there. Next we can say cases per, or I'm sorry, the C is deaths per 1,000 people. Okay, and this should make a much better tooltip, right? Now you can hover over each county and really get an idea of exactly how many cases and deaths they have in each county. And that's really nice. That's basically what I want to do with this map. Now I can add in, right, my annotations. So I'll go ahead and add in a headline, which I'm just going to describe what people are looking at here, right, which is COVID-19 cases in Maryland counties by population. Now I want to add a little bit of chatter, which will just help people understand what they're looking at, right? Prince George's County has the most confirmed COVID-19 cases in Maryland by population, with 29.27 cases per 1,000 residents as of September 1, 2020. Kent County has seen the most COVID-related deaths by population, with 1.22 deaths per 1,000 residents. And we'll put in our note that says data current as of September 1, 2020. And we will add in our source, which again is the New York Times data. And we will add in our source link. That'll link right to the GitHub repo for that data. And I'll add in my byline. Now the one thing we might like to do here, whenever I make a map of Maryland, I always like to kind of put the legend over here, right? Because we've got all this great white space, and over here it's kind of getting in the way with some of the Eastern Shore counties. So maybe if we go over to refine, we can figure out a way to do that. So here's our map key. Let's try putting it on the bottom left. There we go. So I think that's a lot nicer. Now we can go to Publish and Embed, and we can go ahead and publish this chart, and we're essentially done, right? It's going to give us our embed code or our shareable URL. And that's really nice, sort of interactive Chloroplast map. Okay, next I'd like to show you how to make a symbol map using DataWrapper. And what we're going to do here is we're going to create a map that shows top 10 countries for COVID cases per 100,000 people. So this data I got from CNN, and it shows cases per 10,000 and deaths per 10,000. And you can see, yep, that's the same. Okay, good. So you can see that Qatar has the most cases per 100,000 people, followed by Bahrain, French Guinea, Panama, Chile, and down on the list here, right? Now it's interesting to note that the top 3 countries for raw cases are actually India, the United States, and Brazil. And Brazil comes in at number 11 for cases per, or number 10 for cases per 100,000 people. And if this went down a little bit further, you'd see that the United States actually came in at number 11. But once we do the calculations and base it on population, it changes things a little bit. Okay, so we'll go ahead and go back over to our map, and we want to start with a map of the world. That's what we want to use here. So we'll just click Next, and it's going to give us a raw map of the world. And what we can do is just start adding in our points. So we want to add in Qatar, and I'll just type that in and click Add. And it's automatically going to add in a point for Qatar, where it's just showing. And right now the only columns we have are lat, long, and title. But of course we need 2 more columns here, right? We need one for cases per 100,000 people and deaths per 100,000 people. So I'm going to add in a new column for cases per 100,000 people and one for deaths per 100,000 people. Okay, and now we've got these 2 new columns here in our data. And we can go ahead and start adding in our values. So in Qatar, we have 4,278 and 7. So I'll go ahead and copy that. All right. And we can, when we go to our visualize column in a minute, we can actually add in more information on our tooltips and also change how this displays a little bit. So I'm going to go ahead and add in a couple more here, just briefly. We'll add in 4 for the moment, just for demonstration purposes. And I need to get in all of my data before we can really do much here. Okay, so 12. We're going to make sure we click that green check when we're done inputting our data. 20. Okay, Panama. Okay, so now we've got 4 spots, and you can see that Qatar and Bahrain are very close to each other, so they're kind of overlapping a little bit there. So now let's go to visualize. Okay, we can change a few things. We can change, like, do we want to change the size of our dots based on any value in our data? And I think we do, because that adds a real nice aspect of visualization to our data. It helps interpret the data visually a little bit more. So if we choose cases per 100,000 people, it's going to make the dots bigger or smaller depending on the cases per 100,000 people, right? And we can change the map, the sort of the default size there. Let's look back at our data. This doesn't seem quite right. Yeah, okay. No, that seems right. Okay. Okay, map symbol size. We'll use a circle. That's good. Color. We're not going to change the color based on anything. Okay. Okay, so what we want to customize now is the tooltip. So right now it's just showing the name of the country. And I want to go ahead and, just like we did before, add in a little bit more customization. So we want to include and we have to get this exactly right, cases per 100K people and deaths per, and you can see the data was entered for the name of the columns is slightly different, and we have to make sure we get it right or it won't display correctly. So let's see if this displays anything. And I'll show you the full map in a minute where I've added in all 10 countries, and that sort of evens out these dots a little bit. You can see, yeah, I got deaths wrong. So let's see what I'm doing wrong here. Deaths, okay, my K is not the right case there. All right, great. So now I can make this a little bit more readable. Cases per 100K people. I'll add in my break, and then I want to say this one to say deaths per 100K people. Okay, and now our tooltip is a lot more understandable. And of course, we'll want to add in some headline and some chatter for this, right? So we'll want to add in a headline like countries with the most COVID-19 cases by population. Qatar has 4,278 confirmed COVID-19 cases per 100,000 residents, the most in the world as of September 1, 2020. And that's basically it. So if we take a look at my dashboard, we can pull up a graphic where I've completely added in all the complete data. We can see sort of how it looks once we have all 10 countries in there, right? And so this gives us a nice view of not only the top 10 countries of COVID-19 cases, but also it changes the size of the dot depending on the number of the number of cases. So that gives us sort of a nice visual indication of the data, right? So let's go ahead and look back here. There's something going on with our data. Why are these dots so much smaller? 0.062. Okay, got it. Okay, so there's something wrong with our data here. Okay, it's the commas that we put in. Are they interpreting them as dots? Okay, so we actually need to go change our data a little bit. I thought that looked weird. Okay, so if we get rid of these commas, this is going to look a lot more like the way we want it to. I didn't click my green check here. Okay, now we're sort of seeing more like what we want to see here in our test graphic. But either way, if once you add in all 10, and you can see I actually changed the color here to be our Pantone color also for our symbols, this is what it would look like in the end. So I've actually created an exercise for you guys to create basically that exact same map. So exercise 2. And if you follow the URL that you see on the screen right now, you'll get to this exercise. And I include a link to the data, which is the same data that I just used to create the map in the example. And I'd like you to try to create a symbol map looking at the top 10 countries for COVID cases per 100,000 residents. And I went ahead and included the headline, the description, the note, and the source for that graphic. And in the end, you should get something that looks pretty much exactly like this. Finally, I'll just very briefly show you how to make locator maps with DataWrapper. This is pretty self-explanatory, and I don't think you'll have any problem with it at all. This is a very similar interface to the symbol maps that we just made a moment ago, but even a little bit simpler. So you can search for any location, and it can be very general or it can be very specific. And DataWrapper will go ahead and add a marker on the map for you. And you can add, a number of locations to sort of help tell a story in your locator map. Or you can just add one location to sort of help a user understand where a single location is. So I'm going to go ahead and locate Knight Hall. Looks like there's a few of them in the world, but I'm going to go ahead and locate the Knight Hall in College Park, Maryland. So it goes ahead and zooms right into Knight Hall. And we can choose what it says on our dot. And we can also sort of choose the view that people get here. All right, so instead of having the full address, I'm just going to have it say Knight Hall. There's some presets here. It could be a circle or a square or any number of other things. You could change the color of that dot. We can click down to more options. It'll also allow us to add in some tooltip information, right? So we'll just go ahead and add the actual address in the tooltip. I'll go ahead and make it a rounded box there for Knight Hall. And when you hover over it, it goes ahead and gives you some information, right? And maybe we want to add a second location now. We can say, let's go ahead and add in the Baltimore Sun. Let's see if it can find that. So this is the old Baltimore Sun location on Calvert Street. They now operate out of the Baltimore Sun printing facility here on Cromwell Street. So that's the one we'll choose. And we'll just go ahead and set that up the exact same way, right? Okay, so we'll put a rounded box around it. Go ahead and add in our tooltip text. And here it shows 2 locations, right? And we could add as many locations as we want, and it would expand or contract the map as needed. We can go ahead on to designing our map, and it'll let us choose different base maps. We'll go ahead and stick with just the light. And you can even, sometimes it'll have 3D buildings. We can choose which features we want to show in our map. I think we're just going to leave all of these just sort of default now, and you can play around with them as you like. You can even add sort of an inset map, right? It also lets you annotate, so we could add in headline and various chatter and notes and etc., just like we have in all of our other maps. So this is by far the easiest type of map to make, but can be really useful in news design. So I hope you enjoyed learning about DataWrapper, and And I hope you have fun creating infographics and maps using this great program.